Hey guys, happy weekend. I hope you guys are all doing well and you're starting off your weekend with a good start. I want to talk to you today about stress. Stress, worry, insecurity. And they're all kind of tied in the way I look at it. So I kind of want to just start things out and give you something to chew on, point you into a direction that's going to be helpful to you, and just call you into the conversation that we're going to have for the next 12 weeks together on this journey. So, stress. How is stress caused? And the reason I wanted to talk about this today is because, number one, it's obvious every single one of us experience stress. Every single one of us experience insecurity and worry. And so I wanted to really address that in a different way than maybe what you're used to. And because the nature of our conversation and the nature of the journey that we're taking together is that of talking about the human experience, I want to point to thinking. I want to point to the nature of thought, because that's obviously a huge part of the human experience, right? So when we're looking at the nature of thought, it's really easy to not consider that as a variable in everything that we do, because it's something that is always around, right? It's something that every single one of us does, right? Every single human being on the planet thinks. And it's something that's always true. It's something that's always constant. So it's easy to overlook it. And so that's what we do. We don't look at that as the variable that could be in play for every single thing that we experience in our life. When in fact, it is the source of every single thing we experience. Right? Thought is how we experience everything, including stress and insecurity. So I want to give you an example. And I'm going to try to illustrate this the best way I can with the best way I know how to. So if you take a look at stress, take a look at your lifestyle right now, take a look at, relationships in your life, your business, your job, your career, whatever that is, you might have experienced some kind of stress, and you might have said to yourself that it's coming from, my boss. That's really stressful. Or it's coming from my coworkers. It's a really stressful environment. It's coming from this place I visit. It's coming from this relationship that I have. That relationship is very stressful. And so on and so on and so on. So basically what I'm saying is it's very easy for us to point something outside of us and go, that is the source of our stress. Even a simple thing like a conversation can be very stressful for some people, right? But what I want to point you in is the other direction. I want to point you away from the circumstance and the event and the situation or whatever you want to call it. And I want to point you to your thinking. Because thinking is where stress comes from. And the fact is, if you look at it closely, the fact is that that is actually the only source of stress. And here's how I'll try to illustrate that. If you look at the whatever situation you're looking at that you think is causing you stress, you can see that sometimes it causes you more stress and sometimes it causes you less stress. It's not the same level of stress every single time, right? And that to me is a good indication that that's not the source of stress. It's your thinking about the situation that's causing you stress. It's not the situation. Because if your stress levels are fluctuating and the situation is exactly the same, that's a great indication that it's not the situation. The second point I want to make is we always look at circumstances and situations in life and we tie it to our feelings, right? Like, this place is really stressful. That person is really stressful. This situation is really stressful. And so what we're doing there right away, like what I did there right now, was to say my feeling of stress, because stress is a feeling, right? my feeling of stress is coming from that situation. So I'm taking two things into account and making a connection there. But there's a third thing that we don't consider, which is thought. For example, if I'm going hiking or if I'm walking in a trail somewhere, right? I'm going to use this as a metaphor. And I trip over something and I fall. Again, it's very easy for me to say my clumsiness, or the fact that I didn't see the stick on the ground, and the stick on the ground is why I fell, right? It makes sense. I mean, that's what it looks like. That's what caused the fall. I didn't see the stick. There was a stick on the ground. I tripped over it and I fell. But again, I'm trying to make this connection here, that I fell over an object. But there's a third variable here that we don't consider, and that is gravity. Gravity is the reason I fall. It's not the stick or me, or me not looking at it, because quite honestly, if there was no gravity, I wouldn't fall. But we don't take that into consideration, right? It's so easy not to take that into consideration. And why I think we do that is because we're born into gravity. It's something that's always true. It's always constant. It's always working. So it's easy to get so used to it that we just don't look at it. So we have this misunderstanding in play. Like going back to the metaphor, I would have this misunderstanding that I tripped over something because I didn't see it, and that caused me to fall. And I'm not going to say, well, I tripped over something and because of gravity I fell. We don't speak like that. But it is true that it's because of gravity that I fell. So in the same fashion, we don't consider that it's our thoughts that actually cause the stress. It's our thoughts that cause the feeling. It's not the circumstance ever. And again, going back to what I said earlier, is if your stress levels are different and the circumstance is the same, there's an indication that there's something else besides the circumstance that's causing the levels of stress, stressful feelings, insecure feelings, worrisome feelings. So I want to point you into the direction of your thinking. Like, look at what kind of thinking you're doing around whatever situation you're finding stressful, around whatever relationship you're finding stressful, circumstance, event. You can take it into business, your job, your co-workers, everything. If you start to look at what kind of thinking you're doing around that situation, it will start to reveal itself. And the only reason most of us can't see that is because we're not looking in that direction. We're not looking at our thinking. We're looking at the situation. We're trying to fix the situation. We're trying to ignore the situation. We're trying to remove ourselves from the situation. But the fact is that if we have better quality thinking, the situation is not going to be so stressful, right? The situation can remain exactly the same. It's not going to cause us that much stress if we have a higher quality of thinking that we're doing. So again, pointing you back into your thinking, like look at your thinking around what it is that you think is causing you stress, and just see what reveals itself. My experience of it is that it's going to reveal a couple of things. Number one, it's going to show you that it is your thinking. It's not anything else. The more you look into that direction, the more thoughts will start to reveal themselves as thoughts. And what happens next, number two, is that we start to take them less seriously, right? Because we start to see that it's just thoughts, and thoughts are not real, right? We know that. We know that all thoughts are illusions until we believe them and act on them. So all of our dysfunctional behavior actually comes from believing our thoughts. And excuse me, when we can see that it is our thoughts, when we can see that we're having a stressful thought, it starts to lose its power. It starts to lose its grip, and we won't believe it. The moment you see that it's a thought and it's not real, it has no power in it, so you won't believe it. And when that happens, your behavior follows that, right? You won't have dysfunctional behavior stressful behavior, insecure behavior around whatever it is you're facing, because you're going to start to see that it is your thinking around it. It's not the circumstance or the event. But if you don't look in that direction, like most people don't, if you don't look into the direction of the thinking that you're doing in the moment, you're more likely to have dysfunctional behavior, because the dysfunctional behavior comes from believing your thought that you're having and then identifying with it, right? A lot of us identify with our insecure thinking and we think we're insecure. Like, I have insecure thoughts all the time. It doesn't mean I'm insecure. It just means I'm having insecure thoughts. But before I couldn't see this, before I started looking in this direction, I would always identify myself with it. Oh, I'm an insecure person around this. Or I can't do this because I'm feeling really insecure around it. I must be insecure. I need to work on myself and I need to fix myself before I can face that. No, you don't need to do any of that. What you need to do is just look in the direction of your thinking, and it will the insecure thoughts will reveal itself to you. And when that happens, it's literally in a moment, you're out of it. You pop out of it. And you can see that it's an illusion. You let it fade, and you're back down to your neutral self. And then, when you're not, when we are not stressful, insecure, because we haven't believed our thinking, we go back down to being enthusiastic about whatever it is that we have to deal with. Even if it's a stressful environment, we're going to look at it for what it is instead of adding our thinking around it and contaminating it and then looking at it. Because when we do that, it's a lot more distorted, right? But when you can look at things for what they are, you all of a sudden become resourceful because you're in a calm state of mind. You're more engaged with whatever it is that you're facing. You're more curious about it. You have more clarity of your mind. And all of that happens only from looking at the direction of your thinking. I'm going to rephrase that. Look in the direction of the thinking that you do, not the direction your thinking is going, but just look at the fact that you're thinking. And it starts to lose its power, like literally starts to fade away. Why? Because that's the nature of thought. You might have noticed that already in your life, that the nature of thought is that it fades. You don't have the same thoughts you had this morning. You're not going to have the same thoughts an hour from now that you're having right now. So that tells you you are not your thoughts. You can't be anything that fades, otherwise you would also fade. So look into that direction. See what comes up for you. If you don't have anything to relate this to, keep this in your mind over the weekend and see what comes up. You're going to face something sooner or later that you're going to think is causing you stress, and you're going to think is causing you insecurity. And when that happens, slow down a bit and look at the kind of thinking you're doing in the moment. It will reveal itself because you already have that wisdom that guides you towards striving. It guides you towards well-being, right? It doesn't guide you the opposite way. It guides you towards well-being. So if you're willing, right? You don't have to believe anything I say. You don't have to. You can be skeptical as much as you want to, and as much as you are. I wouldn't even encourage you to fight that. In fact, just be that if that's what's going on. Be skeptical. But if you're just willing to look there, if you're willing to look into that direction, you will start to see something. And that's the only thing I want to do. I want to point you in that direction so that you see it for yourself. Because whatever insights that come up for you, whatever wisdom that shows itself, it's not going to come from me. It's going to come from inside of you. And that's what I want to continue to point you in. Okay? So again, you might not be facing anything right now that you can relate this to, but you are going to be facing something sooner or later, because we all do. And when that happens, look at your thinking and see what it reveals to you, and come back and comment on the video, and let's talk about it. Let's discuss. I would love to hear what comes up for you. What are your insights? What are your experiences? What are your questions around it? What are you stuck on? What is cloudy for you in here? What doesn't make sense? Yeah, let's discuss. Thank you. Love you guys, and talk to you soon.